Today's guest with Inside Great Minds is Angela Olea. Angela and I met years ago when they brought us into their organization to do some consulting and training work. And that's brought out a really good relationship with her and her company. Angela started and was the founder and visionary for Assisted Living Locators, a franchise business that she started when she was a registered nurse and realized there was a big hole in inadequacy in care for the elderly and finding the right place for them to go for the right care. So she started a placement business under that concept and has spread into being one of the most highly ranked 500 franchises that you can own today. So it's been a really incredible story learning from her how she got started from the ground up, hearing her early years in the business, and even prior to that, what led her down that path. And then the accomplishments she's made in the interim in building a functional and sizable business that's been really successful in serving that market. And she's gotten a ton of awards in Arizona, where she lives, in Phoenix, as a female business leader and for the organization and the work she's done. So it's a really honored guest we have to have Angela on the show. I think there's a lot of sound bites, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of wisdom packed into this, and a great perspective from someone who started from scratch and built something extraordinary. So I hope you get as much out of this episode as I've gotten out of the relationship I've had with Angela and learning from her along the journey as well. So without further ado, let's start the episode with Angela on Inside Great Minds. Angela and I, the two of us, we met, gosh, has it been like 3 years, 2.5 years? I feel like it's been a while, based on an introduction from one of my colleagues, Emmy and Jenny, right? When they connected, you guys have Assisted Living Locators based out of Phoenix, Arizona. And that's where we came in to do some training with you guys eons ago, it seems like now. But that's when we actually started the relationship. And I remember hearing a little bit about your story, and maybe you can share it with our listeners, because I think it's a really interesting one of how you got into. So maybe let's start here. What Assisted Living Locators is for the layman that's out there, not in the senior living space, and then how you actually founded this whole space as part of your story. Could you share that?
Sure. So, Assisted Living Locators is a senior referral and placement franchise. And we have advisors, 140 plus advisors throughout the US. And the advisors work with families who are looking for options for their loved ones. So, it might be assisted living, it might be care in their own home, it might be memory care, and it's a free service to the senior and their family, and it helps match make them with creating a customized plan with options. And so essentially it's like an eHarmony, matchmaking the senior with a provider.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love it. And how did this space come about? Because this didn't always exist, right? So what's your story about founding the company, and how you uncovered that?
That is a journey, and it's a couple decades. Hard to believe when you talk about time and time flying by. But I launched Assisted Living Locators in 2003 in Arizona. And prior to that, I am a nurse. I still have my nursing license, but I had been in the nursing world working at a hospital. And what prompted me to even really discover what there was a need was working with seniors and working with my patients and seeing them frequently readmitted to the hospital. And they would come in, we would discharge, give them the right medication at the right time, give them healthy meals, and we would discharge them. They would be in not even 72 hours later, a week later, disheveled, medications a mess, hadn't eaten properly. And it was an ongoing treadmill that it was just a never ending. And it was really frustration that turned to inspiration, and how could we help support the senior and or their family in that process. And I began to look at what were the options out there, and discovered through working with a social worker assisted living. And I learned about assisted living as a nurse. That was not anything that was really something that I was fully aware of. In the hospital, you take care of patients while they're in the hospital, and then they either discharge home or the social worker discharges them. They go to rehab. And so getting involved and starting to peel back those layers of an onion, I recognized that there were assisted livings. Well, how do people find them? And how do you know which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones meet the needs? And I was just not satisfied with that. Each question made me hungrier for the next. And I was just on a search for information. And it began like it basically turned into an inferno. A little flicker of questioning turned into an inferno that just consumed me, with this great need to being called in this direction to see if I couldn't be that navigator and really be that connector between the hospital and the community, and helping the families find the right care, the right options, and really have those answers. And so I launched, long story short, I decided this was a calling, and I kept one foot in the hospital for a minute, and recognized that when I started getting the calls, that I needed to really put my time, effort, and energy full time into this endeavor. And I did. And once I started doing that, it really took off locally. And I began to also get calls because I had an internet, I had a website, and I started getting calls from all over the United States saying, hey, do you have someone like your service in this part of the country? And a light bulb went off, that this was not a need that was specific just to Arizona, but this was a nationwide need that was only going to increase.
Yeah, and not to interrupt you there, but I literally thought about this maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I don't know if you saw it, but John Oliver on HBO decided his next target expose was the senior living area and hospice, and specifically talked in his humorous tone a little bit, but really pointed out the on the dark side of it, like how many places are poorly run across the country, or run 100% for profit, 0% for health and well-being of residents, right? So this is, and all he's pointing at is that there's a big fear and concern that families ought to have about, where do I put my mom and where do I put my dad, in a good care location that's affordable, and not have to worry about it being one of the, maybe it's a minority, but it's still, group homes, or, senior care homes that are just not adequate. And so that's really part of your journey, right? Was helping separate the well-run establishments from the ones that you might need to be a little bit more mindful of, right?
Exactly. I didn't think that bringing a brochure in necessarily qualified them to be on the list to make that referral and entrust that that met the qualifications, to give the right medications, to do that proper nutrition, to give that kind of care that I thought not only did they need, but they deserved. And so I started exploring assisted livings, and what you described, it was such a difference. And not to say that a very simple, plain, home that meets those needs versus something that might be extremely decadent, that one wouldn't suit the need of somebody. But it was about the care. What did that person want, whether it was the fancy or whether it was something more simple. And it was about the care, the location, their budget. Could they stay there? Could they age in place? And what were the other residents? So much went into this discovery process. That was the founding, it was the actual building block for creating the franchise. And so I circling to the franchise. So it was a light bulb that went off, and so in 2000 and late 2005, I launched in 2003. 2005, I really started. Again, it was a growing need, and that I was recognizing that this was another calling, and there was not a any type of franchise like this in the U.S. How would I bring this? Uh, it was a daunting idea. Taking this from a local area in Mesa, Arizona, which is where it started, to growing this nationwide. And through trial and error of trying out different things, I decided that the best path was through franchising. And I educated on what is a franchise, uh, the amount of homework that went into not only that, but what are the state laws, and for placement, what were the legislative type of rules, and the care qualities.
So yeah, don't forget where you are right now. But I want to. So as a nurse, you are working like what's a normal, or in your case, what's like a nursing schedule hour wise?
Oh yeah, three 12-hour shifts I worked at the hospital.
Okay.
So yeah, 3 12-hour shifts, and when you were off duty, your time was yours, and that was something completely partitioned off.
So you had
So
three 12-hour shifts. You're in the middle of trying to experiment in a space that hadn't even been developed, which is, helping uh, place seniors in the right home for them, right, with the families. So you're designing and facilitating those relationships in your time. Um, and then you also at this point have, am I wrong, a daughter, right?
2 children.
Two children at the stage of your life. So you're a mom, you're doing three 12-hour shifts. And then you're like, oh, I'm kind of bored and not busy enough. I want to see if I ought to franchise. Like how did you, because you knew it was going to be sure long term fantastic, but short term painful to have to like take even more time out of your schedule to flesh out this franchise model and read all the things you need to read to educate. I mean, what did your staff look like at that point? I mean, what was
Well,
your world like right there when you were looking at that next step?
well, one of the first things that I recognized, and that if I wanted to get the answers that I needed to seek, I needed to go to um, experts. So I basically contacted some. Arizona's has different franchisors already in here. We have quite a few entrepreneurs that had embarked on this, and I began looking up different franchisors, and Massage Envy is one that I went to before I thought about franchising, and said, I just need 20 minutes of your time, and had a face to face, and just peppered with very specific questions of what would you avoid, what did you do well, it, what were directions that you could give, if you could give me advice or give yourself advice, what would you have done same and differently. And I did this repeatedly with different people in the franchising. I hired a franchise consultant and an attorney who still works with me to this day. Found that I just to continue to ask, and those were answers that I got to where I needed to go faster. But it was such a joy. I mean, there was such an energy in this endeavor, and knowing that you're going uncharted waters that others haven't gone, and the discovery process, and drawing plans and creating plans and vision. And I had resources. My father was an entrepreneur. My aunt has a PhD. She's passed now, but she was a business owner. And really, I had these guiding forces in my life that kept me grounded and helped create the next steps, so that I was on a forward path with my eyes wide open. And they just kind of watched in awe as I tackled one thing, and then the franchising was certainly something that that they just said, well, if anybody can do it, you can. Have you, our limitations in business are to this, we can help you overall, but you're in a whole new realm of, that. And so, I launched franchising in 2006 and sold my first franchise in 2007. And, fast forward today, 140 franchises in 34 states across the US. And but it was really brick by brick, and joining the International Franchise Association and tapping into those resources, of franchisors, and their teams. And it's a very transparent, industry. People will definitely share, their mistakes, their wins, and their losses, which really surprised me. But it even to this day, and I'm on the other side of it now, where I mentor and talk with, people that are just embarking on this, and help them, guide them and encourage, and answer questions. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's an incredible growth story. And I think, when you think about your schedule, during that window of time, though, a lot of people can't really fathom. I mean, how many hours do you think you're total putting in between? And I know you started to carve nursing out, but you had your own franchise. You were getting franchising up and running. You were finding someone that would franchise this model with you. I mean, what did your schedule look like during the kind of the peak of activity that was needed from you?
yeah, it was pretty crazy. And there were sacrifices. There were definitely sacrifices that were made. And even though I may have been physically present at ball games and things like that, the mind was spinning. So physically maybe there, maybe not. So there were sacrifices in that, but it was definitely a 24/7 type of activity, because even when I was sleeping, I was waking up with notebooks at bedside, and planning, and really embraced the all of the things needed to successfully build what I needed. And it required, the foot on the gas, and not pump the brakes, not let up. I needed to reach a certain speed to get that momentum going.
Hmm.
And yeah, it happened the way it needed to happen.
Yeah. Talk to me about, you didn't grow up in Arizona. Where did you grow up?
No, I grew up in Savannah, Georgia.
Yeah. And then somehow just the accent vanished.
I did have a little bit more of an accent. I really honestly did not have it. It's so funny because out of the five people in my family growing up, two have, had very thick accents, and yeah, one in between, and then my sister and myself had a little bit. And but there were certain words and that I used that I did get away from using, just because it ended up being the focus. Now it would be cute, but at the time it was not.
Right.
It took the focus away from what I was trying to accomplish, and it became more about the accent, or the words, and where are you from, and it quickly derailed. So y'all, but
Yeah.
there are a few of the, one in particular that I distance arm, distance myself from.
Now only to come out at family reunions, right?
Right, right. And I love it. I love that Southern accent. I love, just hearing it, and but I probably couldn't fake a good deep Southern accent right now. If
It's
I
been
tried,
it's
they,
been
they
too
would call,
long.
yeah, they would say bull, and no, really, I'm from Savannah. So
But talk about growing up there. I mean, so you said you'd mentioned it. You said, "Hey, my dad was an entrepreneur. My aunt, was a business owner." Like, what was it? What did your dad do? What did you get to see them build that was inspirational for you? And what was it like growing up in Savannah, Georgia?
I grew up in a little island, and we had 3.5 acres, and it was the place that all the kids, all of our friends loved hanging out, tree forts and river and creek and a lake and just outdoor playing all the time and having you know, really using that imagination to, I think it's the best childhood memories for my friends and for myself. But my mom was a nurse and my dad was an entrepreneur, and he'd always been in the moving business. And so as a young child, his father created a nationwide company called Fountain Moving and Storage, Red Ball. And my dad was an executive with his father's company, worked his way up through. And my dad and my grandfather sold the business probably when my dad was in his late 30s. And so he moved away from that and he created Islands Moving and Storage, or Islands Moving Company. And so it was everything opposite of what the larger one did. They wanted big moves. They wanted, across the US where, and so he built a niche on the short moves, the apartment moves, the short, those types of things. And that niche flourished. But it was very different, much, much smaller. Um, Again, the building opposite of what he had and keeping it controlled. And he did that up until the time that he passed away, ran that business. So it was really, but both of my parents worked a lot. My mom was again, she's a nurse and worked open heart surgery. And so she was on call 7 days a week. And so they worked a lot of hours. And so seeing that hard work, helped me be creative and again, building the imagination on entertaining, have brother and sister, and I was the youngest, but building things, reading, um, doing things like that. But it also helped me with being, helping me if I wanted to do any type of activities, sports, or I had to ask, I had to find rights. And so from a very young age, I learned how to ask for exactly what I wanted. If I wanted to do something, I needed to make arrangements and figure it out and, get the
Mm.
no, but typically you catch more flies with honey. And so that was something that you work with what you've got. And I did all kinds of sports and activities and learned how to do that. And I also learned how to earn my own money from a young age.
Mm.
People have those big yards in our area. As a matter of fact, my brother and I used to fight over who got we had a riding lawnmower, it was $20 to mow the neighbor's yard. So it was the early bird, got the worm. And so by the time he'd wake up, I'd already mowed 2 lawns and, you know, but those were fighting words.
Fighting words. The
That's all I'm going to say
competition.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, competition, but so you earned your own money and growing up in high school, right? Middle school, high school.
Yeah.
You had to ask when you needed help, and that's actually a really big principle we've heard from others, where it's ask for what you want in life, and a lot of people just never ask, so shockingly, they never receive, right? And it's a really good, I think, principle to just be comfortable and confident enough to ask for what you want. And that's kind of a cool story in your childhood. You literally had to, if you wanted to go to soccer practice, to hitch a ride, right? How interesting. So that, and you felt part of the work ethic that drove you. So, it's interesting. Some people that have successful parents, they don't get the work ethic because they actually never see their parents working. You know what I mean? Like, it's the success happens somewhere else, not around them. And then it's interesting to see that other people see how hard their parents work, and that as a result of that, they actually have that same drive and work ethic. And for you, it seems like watching your dad and mom both push and work careers themselves was part of what helped you have that wake up, early bird gets the worm attitude, and maybe the competition with your brother as well. Is that okay? um I love it. And so then fast forward, so then what made you decide that first career path was for you? If you kind of fast forward to, hey, I want to be a nurse, was that you were just super close with your mom and saw like the impact she had in the nursing environment? Was it just something you had decided you were going to do early on, or what was that first path for you like?
It was probably a combination of things. I think that one of the things that my mom ingrained in me was that you know depend on yourself. Nursing is a career that you will never be without a job, and you will always have security.
Hmm.
And so the variety of what you do is your choice, but the nursing path is something that she felt was a great path, and she did different things, but ultimately probably did the 35 years in the OR. And so that was influential in the direction, but I wasn't convinced 100% of what I was going to do. And that path unveiled itself when I had my first child, and I had a nurse that I had one nurse that was going off duty and one nurse that was coming on duty, and the contrast between the two was tremendous. And the second shift nurse that came on duty was so positive and impacted the experience, because I was very young, and it was super easy delivery, and everything went smoothly. But the other one was like, oh no, you're going to have, this is going to go badly for you, and all of these. And I was like, what the heck? And was trying to put the fear. And the other one was just a cheerleader in the corner. And I thought, my gosh, the impact that a nurse has in the most vulnerable time, what a great gift to bring that to your patient and their family. And I knew right then that was the right path that I wanted to go, and what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So yeah, that solidified it. That was a direction, but it wasn't 100%, you know, the why. I had certain reasons that had been explained, but I didn't have my why until it was about, really being that advocate, that cheerleader. And, you know,
That's interesting because that kind of migrated that same purpose to what you do with assisted living locators. You're being an advocate and a right. I mean,
Mhm.
it's that part of nursing that translated over, that drew you to that
Yeah. Yeah.
opportunity. Very cool. Yeah, I love that. With I know we're jumping around your life here, but if we go to okay, you started the franchise model, you brought in your what was like, what are some one or two moments that stand out to you that were some of the most challenging? Like I think in every entrepreneur's journey, every business owner's journey, they have usually a lot of moments where they go, what did I get myself into? Is this what I really want to be doing? Like this is really, that a couple of moments where it's like exhaustion, or they're just tired, or a literal event kind of calls into question. What are some of those most difficult moments that you experienced early on in
Yeah.
scaling?
In franchising, you've got two paths. One, you can you can work with consultants who introduce people to your concept. They're transitional coaches, etc. And another path is where you're out doing advertising, and you're bringing in people through expos or different website, and doing that type of advertising. And so I wanted to get the word out as quickly as I could. And one of the paths that I wanted to take was working with consulting groups. And because I was, number one, a female, there weren't a lot of females that were in that. Secondly, it was a brand new, um, I don't even know if you could call it an industry yet, because I was the first in that space. People really didn't understand what that was. And so to get that voice and to get a seat at the table, hence the accent, and there were a few things working against me at that time, but it wasn't it was a can-do attitude. It wasn't it made me be more creative, more persistent, to get a seat at that table one way or the other. And I did. And when I finally did get that seat at the table, it that's when it really broke open. But I was not going to take no for an answer. And that persistence being uh, warm and educational, and, just, reminding them that this was happening, and it could go easier, it could go hard, but one way or the other, they were going to hear my message and, see that I had already been doing this, that it was successful in my own backyard. And this is the benefit. These are the families that I've helped tremendously. And the facts, really being a fact presenter, you can't deny the facts. And the facts are this aging population. The fact is people are discharging from the hospital. The fact is assisted living is growing. And so really making sure that they knew the facts. And so that was probably, you know,
Was it frustrating when people like couldn't see the vision? Like you would talk to them, and what would they do? Would they just like be like, "What?" Were they
well,
confused or?
get, come back in a couple years, come back when you've got this many, franchises, come back when you've got this or that. And so, it was dismissive, but what I learned were, I needed to find the big forest or big trees in the forest. And, that has been a key to my success is, not necessarily the gatekeepers, but it's getting to the key people that are the decision makers. And if I can get a few minutes of that, I was confident that the message would be heard and it would have a ripple effect. And so I had to redraw the game plan and not knock at the door at the bottom. It was slingshot through the tower window at the top, and that helped. um, but it really took some strategy in getting to that point. But it took a few no's, in that process. But that once it opened it up, it was a domino effect with the different, and soon I had people calling me wanting me to join their organization and represent that they needed something like this in their inventory. And so the tide changed,
Hmm.
at a given point. And now, it again, 140 franchises, and the consulting groups are probably 90% of our business
Hmm.
and how we get franchises.
Now all you have to do is create really entertaining rap videos to
Go boldly. That's what I say. Forgettable is not a good thing.
tell.
You
Can you've got to tell that? Can you briefly tell this rap video story of how what you did here?
Well, it is certainly something. It is something. Usually you have opportunities at conferences where once a year all of the different groups in the inventory have an opportunity to remind the franchise consultants who you are and what you do. And usually it's a 2-day, minimum 2-day event where you're in line, for getting in front of them. And so I have a franchise development director that typically was doing the presentations, and he happened to plan his vacation at the time that this was. So I was going to need to step up and do this and be the presenter. And I discovered, that I assumed that I was going to be on the second day after lunch, that I was going to get that right time to stand in front of the brokers, and do my pitch. And that was just, not acceptable. And so I began plotting of what could I do that was going to make a bold impression. And if I did have that magic hour of, 2 o'clock, that bewitching hour after lunch, second day, that I was just going to be on, just rocket. And so I started thinking of, what I could do. You have 5 minutes to get up there and present. And so I basically created, a rap video that talked about, I got up there and I started talking like Charlie Brown, blah, 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 Charlie Brown's teacher, and what. And so I mentioned about, well, we like to keep it fresh. I talked just a few seconds, and I had a Fresh Prince rap video that I, said just a minute, and I turned around like I was coughing, and had two other people join me on stage, crank the music, had a jersey on, and had that told all about assisted living locators and the Fresh Prince, uh, rep, and it was a standing ovation. They jumped from their seats, they were yelling, and I did have the 2 o'clock time. So that was
It's so great. And I think it illustrates, well, it's funny. It illustrates two really awesome principles that you operate on. And one of them is, when I first got to know you, I was like, oh, Angela's pretty, focused, serious, businesswoman, right? Well, it's so powerful when you have the ability to not take yourself seriously, right? And I think if you first shook hands with Angela, you'd be like, "Oh, this person, this woman takes herself really seriously." And then when you told me that you were designing this rap video, I was like, "No way!" And then, but you did it, and it takes someone both with a lot of confidence and who's okay being a little silly at the same time to pull that off, and that was awesome.
it was something that had never ever been done before. And what surprised me the most, and this is coming from a female, females can be really challenging on other females. Really the hardest, the most challenging I had in the broker networks, once I was able to enter in, most of the referrals did come from, and again, this is a male dominated field, but the women who were in it are super successful. And so, but they're a very much the minority, and I had not cracked that nut to get those referrals from that relationship. And when I was up on stage, the people that were the loudest and the most receiving of that, and sense, were the females. Everybody was, but that really was a baptism that I needed to indoctrinate me into this whole world of putting, like you said, really putting myself out there. And they were so receptive of that was it. That was a game changer, for me. And we raised the bar, every year. And after that, I mean, we were just a talk of that whole conference. We blew everybody away with it.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's creativity, not taking yourself seriously, taking a risk. There's a lot of good principles that came together for that one.
Well, I went into it with the attitude that either way, it was going to be, I was going to be top of mind. If it went, the lyrics were done so well, and it really told the story of assisted living, Fresh Prince of Senior Care, and told our story. But even if everything didn't go well, it was still going to go well, because at these 2-day conferences, people go in a blur. They are just saturated with information, and the biggest takeaway was the buzz of they knew who we were, on top of the world. So it was great.
Yeah, you uncovered simultaneously that you also have a gift for rap that you never knew about. And if someone was interested in learning about the franchise opportunity you had, would they get to watch this amazing video at some point? Is it included in the interview
it,
process?
it's for once they're embraced
Okay.
in the franchise family. It's
Perfect. Well, I will make sure here in our last few minutes you get a chance to kind of line people to where they can go if they want to learn a little bit more about what you're building, either from a senior perspective and where they can learn more about using you guys for placement, or also on the franchise side. But give us this too. Where two things I love asking all of our guests. One is books or articles or trainings that you've read along your path building this that have been most helpful to you. They could be technical around franchising. It could be more, E-Myth revisited type, but what have some of the higher impact books that you've read? One or two titles.
Jim Rohn, The Power of Ambition. I love, uh, just it resonates with me. Phil Jones is How to Persuade and Get Paid. They're short, but it aligns with me. Traction. Uh, any anything by Gino Wickman has been something that I find is tried and true, and it really breaks it down into blocks and learning blocks. But I am an avid reader, and I believe that's the great equalizer,
Yeah.
books.
Well, that another distilled. I always try and like distill these from our guests, but I loved hearing from your early journey that not only are you afraid to ask, you're not afraid to ask for help and ask for what you want, but you also have a habit of seeking out guidance and mentorship, and you're not afraid to ask for that help either, right? So whether that takes the form of books, or you're reaching out to people in the franchise like the Massage Envy and trying to pick their brain to, or coaching. I mean, you've always been the type of person that's a student of the game and are hungry to learn more information, more knowledge, right? And there's no brainer that's a reoccurring principle behind all the successful people we've had on here. So I love that. Um, one principle, and maybe that's it, but what's one principle or strategy that you would share to someone who may be just beginning the journey of their early stages of growing their business? And you can think of it just like, hey, what's one, if there's one principle, one strategy you would tell someone early in their journey of starting what you've built. Or if you were to turn around, another way to phrase it would be, if you were to turn around and give Angela today, give advice to the Angela back in 2004, 2006, what would be a principle or a strategy or an idea um, that you would share?
Not to, one of the things that I would say that I practice and I would advise is, not to set limitations on yourself. I mean, it is absolutely the the world is your oyster for opening up the possibilities, and you figure out a way to do it. It's all about mapping it out. If you've got a vision, map attempt to map out where you want to go, then seek advice on if you're on the right path, and get that validation of what it is. Don't have analysis paralysis. Once you see where you want to go, figure out a way, or find out those peers or mentors or other people that are doing it, and go right in there and see if you're on the right path, and to help you get there. So I mean, that's truly the lesson. That's the acceleration. The worst that can happen is that they say no and you go to somebody else.
Who's next? Yeah, absolutely. Love that.
Right. Create your list. Don't limit your list of resources, and don't limit yourself and where you can go.
Angela, yeah, fabulous interview. Thanks for carving out the time in your busy schedule to be on here and to share that. Where can people go on the franchise side, and then also where can people go to learn a little bit about working with you guys on placing their loved ones or their parents?
So assistedlivinglocators.com, they can find the franchising. There's a link that will take them to the franchising site if embarking on a new endeavor, something that they want to explore. And on the Assisted Living Locators, they can do a search and find our senior living advisors all across the United States if they need help with that side of their journey.
Love it. Well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. Angela, thanks for taking the time with us. It's been great, good advice along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you.